Here we go. Hello and welcome to Eye Openers. I am so glad you guys are joining us today for another insightful conversation where we not only cover the important stuff, coffee, but also business insights that will change the way that you lead and grow your business forever. So thank you so much for being here with me today, Tom. How are you?
Brittany, I am thrilled to be here.
Awesome. And I'm caffeinated to be here. So we always kick this show off with the coffee because it is the thing that helps me show up energized and wide-eyed and ready to go. And it helps me with a little bit of that mental clarity to see those insights. How about you?
I wouldn't say I'm a coffee addict. I'd say I'm a coffee achiever. Ever since I was in the Navy, that was like my one vice. I can drink coffee 24/7. And a few years ago, my doctor told me that I needed to cut down on the number of cups of coffee I drank a day. So I took his advice and I start using a bigger cup.
I love that. Show us again. What does your cup say?
A buddy of mine gave me this one, and he said, "We're all still in beta."
I love that. You know what? That's actually like a really great segue for our show, right? Like this is about learning. This is about growing. This is about, getting feedback on all the things we're doing and looking at it and seeing how we can improve. But I guess that also rings true for our coffee. So when I first started drinking coffee, I was a Starbucks addict. So don't judge me on that. Some people are like all about Starbucks. Some people are not. But I grew up in the Pacific Northwest. So you could throw a stone to Starbucks no matter where you looked. But now I think I've gotten a bit fancier with my coffee, and I love to support all the local roasters. And we have one here in Santa Barbara called Handlebar, and their coffee is just so good. And I judge it by how good does it taste when I make it myself at home? Because that's like a big difference, right? I don't know
True.
if you're like a home brewer kind of person, or some people like have to go out and get their coffee every day. Which one is it for you?
For me, it's always brewing at home. And it's not only what does it taste like, but what does it smell like, right? Because that just triggers me in so many ways. And I started out in the Navy with wardroom coffee. It was the cheapest supplier the government could find, and it still tasted better than the water on board ship. So after that, everything is better coffee. And my big one here is in Michigan. It's called Big B. It's a local roaster. Maybe it's not as fancy. I don't put all the stuff in it, but it keeps me going.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, they say that's better for you anyway, not to put all the stuff in it. My trainer's like, you need to learn how to drink that coffee black. And I've been trying, but I still like a little bit of cream to make it creamier.
I was going to say the only time I have iced coffee is in the winter here in Michigan.
In the winter?
Yes. When I get into my car and realize that I've still got a cup of coffee there that's like cold, and I'm like, it's still coffee. I'll still drink this.
Oh my gosh, my husband does that. Drives me totally nuts. He like puts it back in the fridge, and I'm like, what are all these half drinking coffees? And he's like, oh, it's perfect. It's ready to go the next day. So maybe you guys are just resourceful, or just, have a lower standard with your coffee, but whatever works for you. I will not judge there.
Don't judge my addiction.
I won't, as long as you don't judge mine, right? Well, hey, as much as I love talking about coffee, you have so much value to bring the audience today. And I am so thrilled that you're here. As a podcaster myself, I'm so excited to chat with you about your company, Interview Valet, which is about podcasting. Give everybody your story. And it's just chock full of ways in which people can expand their business through podcasts and other interview formats. So let's give you a real introduction, though, not just like the guy who is a coffee achiever, but you were in podcasting, like, was it 2014? Like back before it was everywhere. And like you say here, Tom asks that you consider you were just one conversation away from connecting with your audience, from getting your message out. If you're somebody who has ever heard like, oh, you're like the best kept secret. I've heard that 100 times. Like, you need to get out there. You need to get your message out. And Interview Valet is a great way to do that. So Give me a bit of background pieces here. You were in the Navy, which I love to highlight when I have a guest who has military background, because I think it does so much for creating discipline and structure, and that is paramount in building a successful business. But maybe give me like 3 of your own highlights for your bio that you want the guests to know about you.
Sure. And I would say the first one is my first job out of college was running nuclear power plants. And, people are like, well, how's that apply to business? And I always look at it as it's all about systems and processes, right? Right now, and there's 20-year-old high school educated people running nuclear power plants. They're very smart, they're very trained, but there's systems there. And often when people say, well, you don't understand my business, it's too complicated, I can't teach it, I can't delegate it. I'm like, listen, if they can teach people how to run nuclear power plants, you can teach somebody how to do your business. So that would be like one of those foundational things.
Yeah.
The other one is that my background is also in inbound marketing, using
Mm.
content to attract, engage, and delight customers. I'm really big into automation, right? And technology. And you hear people say, you're one funnel away, right? And we've all heard that. I think that's the biggest lie out there. There's a part for
Ooh.
automation, but I would I would look on my life. The best things in my life came from a conversation, right? My bride did not come from a Facebook marketing campaign and a funnel, right? It's because somebody introduced her. We had that conversation. And you think about all the great things in your life, it probably started with the conversation.
Gosh, what a great way to put that. I love that analogy because I believe in, I use that all the time. I work with people in building culture and leadership development, right?
Yeah.
And so I say, like, leadership happens one conversation at a time. And what a great point that look at all the great things in your life. Like, my kids didn't come through a funnel. Like, I didn't say, okay, everybody apply here and we'll see like who makes it to which stage of the sales pipeline, like same with like a partner, like you said, like it happens one person at a time. And we forget that because when everybody's going high tech, you can still go high touch.
Yes. And I don't think it has to be one or the other, right? Because, the third thing I would say is I live in Kalamazoo, Michigan, right? And people are scratch their head and going, does that really exist? Yes, it does. And having those conversations here can be tough, right? It used to be that you had to get on a plane and go to different places. Well, the pandemic really leveled everything. You can have
Yeah.
those conversations from anywhere to anywhere. So I
Yes.
think, there's a lot of problems in the world right now, but there is no better time to be alive or to be growing a business with the tools that we have.
Yes, completely. So I gotta love this about a live interview. The neighbors landscapers are here. Let me just close the door real quick because it's too loud. Folks, we do not edit this stuff out. It is real life. It is happening real time. And I know all of you can relate, but that's better than like when my kids make their guest appearances into the show, usually half clothed, but landscapers. So, yes, you're right with that and approach. It doesn't have to be either or, it can be and. You can have components that are automated. There are people who love to be in the funnel. Like, I have people like that all the time. They're like, oh, I loved I read every single one of your welcome series emails and I clicked all the buttons and I downloaded all the PDFs. And that's great. But a lot of times people don't have time for that. And they either want to go straight to the point. They're ready, to take action with you. And then that's when being able to hop on a Zoom call, no matter where you are in the world, and utilizing technology in that way can still help you have that one conversation at a time. So great to look at it that way. My guests know, and if you guys have forgot, I love to start with a big question to really set the tone for this interview. This is not just like a surface level conversation. My podcast is really about creating levels of insight to help audience members say, oh, he's just like a click or two ahead of me. I'm so glad to hear that insight that changed everything for him. So you guys know I have pre-conversations with these people. They're willing to open up. They're willing to share those greatest things that move the needle for them so that you guys can benefit as well. So Tom, if you and I were to speak 3 years from now, what would you have accomplished that you'd want to tell me about?
I
Like,
would
I
be
pick up the phone, "Oh, it's so great to hear from you. It has been 3 wonderful years. Here's what's going on."
it would revolve around the conversations I had and the places I went.
Mm,
Right? Because in my mind, that's all that's ever been memorable in my life, right? Relationships are the ultimate currency. So I'd be saying, I just got back from this conference and I got to talk at this one. I just went to this country and my bride and I, we spent a week there. I didn't speak the language, but there was a translator and it was the best thing. Have you ever been to, this country? And, that's the things that I would be talking about. I would talk about my team of I've got these great people. I don't even have to go into the day-to-day stuff anymore. I'm living out my dream of being the chief evangelist officer, not
yeah.
the chief bottle washer.
Mm, I love it. I love it. Very cool. And so if that's if that's your dream 3 years from now, where are you at on the way to that? Like, tell us, like, how is that different than how you're living right now or how your business is right now?
I would say it's the next level of where I am right now. Because if you would have asked me 3 years ago, that's probably the same answer I would have given you.
Okay.
The when I started the company, I the title CEO, I struggle with that, right? I got friends that are CEOs of publicly traded companies. Just because I'm leading a team of 35 doesn't make me chief um, uh,
Executive officer.
executive officer. I don't even say it. To me, CEO is chief evangelist officer. That's what I want to do. I want to evangelize the company, the category, and our customers. But when I just said, and I give myself the same answer, right? When I said, but I'm not doing all the bottle washing anymore, right? And so often, what's keeping me from being where I wanted to be is I I I get comfortable in doing the day-to-day stuff. I know how to do it. I'm good at that. I can
Mm,
wash the bottles, and sometimes it's scary to go out there, so I'll just stay with what I'm doing right here.
what a really great point. And I see this all the time in my work where, you got so good at what you do because you love doing it. And that's something that is required to become super excellent at your craft, is really a passion for it. But when that happens, it's hard to pull yourself out of the day to day because you love it so much. So I work all the time with leaders who set out um, to do it better than the company they were working for. They've achieved that, they've grown the team, and now it's time to kind of like extract yourself from some of those daily tasks and become, like, elevate yourself to that chief evangelist. So tell me about, like, the opportunity that lies in that and maybe some of the challenge that you're finding with
Well, the biggest challenge is myself, right?
it.
Um, that when people say, "Who's your biggest competitor?" I'm like, "It's the guy that looks at me when I shave," right? And so it's really pulling back and saying, "Does this get me to where I want to be?" But also, does this get the team to where they need to be? And one of the things that I struggle with now is there's a lot of things I could do, and I could do them faster and quicker, and probably better than other people, right? But that doesn't help, right? If I'm always tying my kid's shoe, they're never going to learn how to do it. So I've taken a lot of pride in looking at it and saying, I find great people, and to teach them. And I find that I get more joy now when I see them doing it. And I often find out, wow, I never thought about doing it that way. They're doing it better than me. And so as I look at like legacy now, the things that I look back in my life where I'm most proud of is, that intern that I mentored when he was in college. And now he's running his own company, or the team members that were with us and then got another great opportunity. I'm happy for them. Or the team members we've got right now that have really, really stepped up into the next level. So it's like I want to help them, but I've realized that just by doing it for them isn't helping them. It's really to mentor them and then also bring them more challenges.
Right, right. What a great point. And thank you for being so willing to share that. That Gosh, isn't that the truth? And for most successful people, for most, ambitious people, we can be our own worst enemy, or just like the one who's stifling our greatest next achievement, our greatest growth in our organization, because we can either get too in the details, or we think we're helping people, but we're actually disempowering them. We're not allowing opportunity for their own growth and development. And to truly be a leader is to really create that space for them. Like, say, here you go, like walk right into it, right? Let them kind of figure it out, even though it's so hard to watch people. Sometimes you're like, don't do it that way. Like, go to the left, don't go to the right. But that is how people develop the skills they need. That's how they develop the problem solving skills and entrepreneurial mindset, and somebody allowed that for you at some point along your journey, right? That's usually the thing. And we forget, because we get so, I just want to help you. I just want it done right. I want the efficiency, but we have to like let go of some of that to really have our organization elevate to that next level.
When you said that, it made me think, not only did somebody let me do that, but somebody trusted me
Mm-hmm.
enough to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And when I do it for other people, what am I really telling them is that I don't trust you to do this. I don't trust that you can grow into this.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, that's powerful. It's almost like raising children too, right? I
Right.
I don't trust you to go across the street. I don't trust you to ride your bike in the street, whatever it is. At a certain point, they're going to have to learn.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely don't trust my 3-year-old with riding the bike in the street yet, but she's getting there. So sometimes she doesn't want to hold my hand, and I say, okay, we'll just like be within arm's length. But that's where our trust is at right now.
Right.
And but this is the same thing that's true in our business too, right? Like, okay, give a little bit of the rope and see what happens,
Yeah.
and trust builds from there.
And as I think about that, it's you trust them with things that are appropriate, and they rise to your level of trust, right?
Mhm.
3-year-old, I don't trust you to drive the car, right? But I trust you to stay in your bed all night long, right?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. And things like that. Employees, everyone that we have, you know, rises to our level of trust.
That's right. What a really great point. So how are you working with that? So knowing that, hey, the guy who stares at me in the mirror is sometimes my greatest competitor, and knowing that, okay, it is about trust, it is about giving the space, and the greatest opportunity is really to develop these team members and watch them thrive. What's challenging that? What do how do you pick that apart day to day in order to create what you're trying to create?
Yeah, it's interesting because most of my direct reports are young enough to be my children. They see it, I don't. Right?
Mm,
And it's not until we started to talk about that. And so oftentimes it's hard for them to push back, right? Because I'm old enough to be their parent. I'm signing the paycheck, all the rest of that.
mhm,
And so I found that I need to be radically transparent with them and let my heart out there. This
mhm,
is what I'm trying to do. I need you to manage me as much as I manage you, right? And I love them for that. We were on a call just the other day, and I went through a 4-minute explanation why we need to do it this way, all the rest of that. And then finally, somebody just said, okay, so Tom, what exactly do you want us to do? Perfect. Thank you. I wanted to make sure they understood why we're doing it that way, but I wasn't clear on what we were trying to do.
mhm,
Or another one of my managers, I would say she manages me better than I manage her. And when she does, I'll call her out for it as an example to the others, right? Because often I want to help, right? So Brittany, we're on a call. I guarantee you I will leave with a half page of to-dos. Okay, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do that, and my heart's in the right place. I really wanna do that, but I've got another call after this, and I've got another half sheet of there. And, um, Jessica is great, where she'll come back and she says, "Well, I can do that one, I can do this one, I can do this one. When you do that, could you record it so that we can make a process for that so you never have to do it again?" And I'm like, "Thank you." And so, that empowers them because I hope Hope's not a strategy. I believe they're using that with their direct reports also.
Awesome. Yeah. Yeah. And so, and like you talked about kind of hiring for your gaps too, like having people who see things differently than you and are able to make suggestions to make it better. Like you said, like, hey, let's record that. Let's get a process in place so that we're not doing it again. That requires somebody outside of you kind of like seeing that potential because you're so like in it, you're on to the next thing.
I think it's also come with time, realizing I don't have to be perfect,
Yeah.
right? And just to let them know, here's my strengths, here's my weaknesses, here's
Mhm.
how you can help me. For the longest time, especially, being a Navy nuke, you got to be the smartest person in the room, or at least let people think you are.
Mhm.
As a 3-year-old, you probably don't want to let your 3-year-old that you don't know everything in the world. But at a certain point, they get where they ask a question, and it's like, I don't know. That wasn't my strong suit. Go ask your mother.
That's last night. My daughter was asking, my daughter loves science, and she was the 6-year-old. Hey, like, tell me about bacteria. I'm like, okay. And like, I had a few talking points. And then she's like, no, but how did the first bacteria happen? Like the very first in all history. I was like, whoa, like amazed that she could even conceptualize that. And then I was like, I definitely don't have the answer to that. Like, we need to bring in, somebody at that pay grade. It's not me.
Let's find out together.
Yeah. I was like, there's a thing called Google. Let's really, pull that out. But yeah, just so I love that you're talking about what you're talking about here is modeling something that makes it so psychologically safe for your team also to not feel like they have to show up and be perfect. Because when, like you're talking about this age difference and there's a power dynamic that exists, but if you model like, hey, we're looking for great effort here, but it's okay if you get it wrong. It's okay if you don't know the answer to something. It's just about what you do next. That teaches them that that's more important. And you're focused on a value set here that makes it easier for them to show up and dive in every day. If the model and the value was of perfection, it would be a scarier place to work. It wouldn't be as safe to throw out new ideas or to challenge you on something.
Yeah. I never
So
thought about
really,
it
as
from
a
the power
leader,
dynamic.
oh, sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry. The way you said it was a power dynamic there. I never thought about that because you don't see, I would say I don't see the power dynamic looking down as much as other people see it looking up.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a huge self-awareness point for leaders to understand. Like I have so many leaders that I work with that are like frustrated by employees' performance or lack of initiative or problem solving or whatever. But I'm like, look at like you hold all the power though. Like you hold the keys and you can be like, hey, like, no, I didn't like it that way or whatever. It makes it scary for people to try because they really do want to please you. But if you can if you can come down, get on the same level by the way that you interact, by sitting on the same side of the table with people, by being silly, by showing other sides of your personality and that you're just human too, that it allows them to show up in the same way. So you get to create the culture of your organization. You get to create how your team shows up by the way that you do. And if you're not paying attention to that, you're missing a huge opportunity. So let's talk about some of the key skills that got you to where you are today. Now, I love this, nuke stories, but I bet you've got a handful of skills that really you use on a daily basis that are tied into a story, an insight.
Yeah. I think persistence is probably one of the key ones, right? I'm not the smartest person. I'm not the most creative, but sometimes I can just be the most stubborn, right? So when I started out in sales, everybody said in medical device sales, "Oh, you can't go from the inside to the outside. You've got no sales experience." And I can remember one of my best customers ever gave this feedback to my sales manager early on, and he's like, "I didn't know if Tom was the stupidest person I'd ever met or the most persistent." But he said he just kept coming back. And he was like that dog that came back with something else. He was smiling. He was all positive. And I'm like, I look at it as, he never threw me out. So he must have wanted me there. And so he said after the better part of about a year, he threw me a bone, right? I'll give him something for showing up. And he said that was like throwing pigeons bread to get him to go away. He said, then he was there all the time. Well, fast forward, this guy within 2 years was my biggest account, right? He probably accounted for 20% of my business eventually. He was one of the key reasons that I was one of the top sales reps. Um, but as I looked back at it, there were so many other people that I would see come in, start to make the sales calls. 2 months later, they were on to the next one.
Yeah.
And, the ones that I was worried about, you get your business the same way you lose it, or you lose the business the same way you get it. If somebody was there for the long term, I'm like, oh, maybe they'll outlast me, right? But I think it was just that persistent. And the same thing with Interview Valet. The first 3 years that we did it, I'd give my elevator pitch, and I was so excited. And Brittany, people would look at me and go, "Oh, that's great. What's a podcast?" And I was like, oh, and early on, I thought, oh, we were way, way too early. But then about 2019 hit, and then COVID hit and really helped us. So I think there's a lot of people that would have been smart enough to give up before I did.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. Persistence. I love that. That's a really great example. Can you share a military example just for the audience? And I just love highlighting the great things that you learn there, like maybe along the lines of discipline, because what I see so much, it speaks to persistence, but I think that there's like sometimes like a lack of almost organization of, hey, I need to do this small little action item, and over time that builds up to help me achieve the big thing. Or how is that kind of, what were the things that were drilled in that you still use today?
Yeah, and one of the things I sometimes push back on that whole discipline thing,
Mm,
um, because everybody says, well, the everybody in the military is so disciplined. Well, they draw in for the same employment pool that the rest of us are, right? It's not like they have this magic thing where they can say we only get disciplined people. I
no,
think it's not only the discipline, it's probably more the routine, right? You have a routine, every day you show up, right? The alarm goes off in the morning, taps plays at night. You do your best throughout the day. And I think the people that start and stop, they never get that momentum going,
Mhm,
right?
mhm.
And sometimes, especially in the days of social media here, it's tough, right? Because you think everybody else is an overnight success and they're killing it, you know. No, the people that are killing it are the ones that are showing up every day, doing the work. It's almost like being a freight train, right?
Mm,
It doesn't seem like it's moving that fast, but it continues to build speed, and all of a sudden it's going so fast and it's unstoppable.
yeah.
And so I think it's the same way in the military of, um, some days are good. Most days you feel like you got beat up on it, but you're making a little bit of progress, right?
Mhm,
And
mhm.
continuing to build on that progress. And then all of a sudden you look back and you overestimate what you can do in a day, but underestimate what you can do in a year, or, where you could be in 3 years. Right.
Right.
And thank you again for that question. In the beginning, I'm going to have to like set a reminder to listen to this episode again in 3 years.
All right. I love that. Oh my gosh, let's really have that phone call.
Perfect.
Let's do it. Okay, I love this. Um, Perfect. So we're creating insights for you too. See, this is how it works.
Hey, I'm
Um,
still in beta.
Still in beta. I love that. You know what? That's like the best leaders understand that, right? That perfect is not a thing. And, modeling some of that humility and that growth mindset is what makes that accessible for your team too. And that if you aren't learning and growing, you're dying. And so what does that mean for your organization? What does that mean for your own skill set? Like, this is about loving the journey. And
Okay.
I was reading some because I'm a total nerd and I love brain science, and that's actually behind like all the things that I do. But we're talking about true motivation and true dopamine and what that really does for you. Everybody think it's the happiness drug, but it's not. It's the focus and the drive that dopamine creates for us. And we're talked about in this podcast, see, it's the way he talks about that those who learn to kind of reframe and love the journey and the process of it, love the learning opportunities that happen, that not
Yeah.
they don't see it as a failure. It's like a learning opportunity each step along the way. If you can love that like 1% micro movement, then you will be a success no matter what, because you have that ability and that drive to keep going.
When you were saying that, it reminded me of a story. During the summers in college, I got the opportunity to work at Los Alamos National Lab.
Mhm.
At that time, there were more PhDs per square acre than any other place in the world. It was unreal, but often you couldn't tell the difference between the janitors and the PhDs that were running the place, right? And because the dress code was about the same, and somebody pointed out to me early on how you could tell the difference. And they said, the janitors won't ask you questions because they understand everything they need to do. He said the PhD that's running the program, he sees like a college student walk by and he pulls you in and starts saying, well, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? Because he's looking for new ideas, new new discoveries, new ways of looking at it. And
Mhm.
I looked at that and I thought, when I find somebody that has all the answers, my thought is either they're the smartest person alive or the stupidest person alive, right? And they're lying to somebody and it's probably themselves.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, I would go with probably not the smartest person if they think they have all the answers, because that's quite naive, right?
Right.
To think that you do. Um, so let's talk about a moment, a breakthrough that you had that changed the way that you lead or saw your business. And this is probably going to take us back to the beginning of Interview Valet. But I would love to hear about, something that was just a key insight for you that's like, oh my gosh, we need to totally pivot over here, or here's this great big opportunity we've been missing.
Um, I'd say the best piece of fiction I've ever read or written was the business plan that I put together, right? Everything was perfect and every graph went up and to the right. It was a straight line, right? And I started out, and this company was originally started with, I thought, well, I'll teach this, I'll write a book. And, it was a cheesy book. It was like a PDF that I gave away. And somebody said, oh, you should teach this, right? Sure. So I started to do some courses. And uh, every month I would update the course based on feedback. And after 3 months, I killed the course off, Brittany, because the people that were honest with me were the ones that said, I don't want to learn how to do this, right? I just want to be the guest and you do all the rest. And it's like, but that's not the business plan, right? That's not what I have. And they told me what they wanted. I mean, a customer even told us, you should take this for the name of the company. And he had bought the domain name and gave it to me, right? This would be a perfect name for it. And this was like one of our beta testers. It's hard to kill the beta when they just already named your company
Yeah.
and gave you the domain. But with that, it was the idea that I don't have all the answers, right? And I've got to be smart enough to know the right answer when told, right? So I've got hypotheses, right? But let's test them and see what the market says, what the data says, and that was humbling because as a as an entrepreneur, I want to have all the answers. I want to tell you exactly where we're going, and it's not that. It's sort of reading the map as you go and getting people's feedback on it.
Right, right. Wow. How amazing. So totally different than what you expected, did not go along with that business plan, and so it's hard to receive, right? Because you're like, no, 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 I've totally got my heart set, like this is what we're doing.
Mhm.
So it takes a lot of self-awareness and a lot of humility, which is ultimately a ton of strength, to receive that feedback that didn't line up with what you thought you were going to hear, and
Uh,
take it and pursue it. That's incredible.
and you make it sound better than it was, right? Because I was
Yes,
like, no,
tears.
if I can just improve this course, the problem is them, it's not me, right? This month I'll redo it and all the rest of this. And they were giving me the feedback. I wasn't always listening to it. And it wasn't until some people that were I respected and were very honest with me. And one of the jokes that I've always used, and anybody that knows me has heard this joke before, is that we're all selling Preparation H, right? Nobody cares about our product or our service. They just want their pain to go away. And one of the beta testers, who was a friend, said, listen, Tom, you know that you always talk about, Preparation H. He's like, you are trying to teach me how to be a proctologist. I don't want to do that. I just want my pain to go away. Let me be the guest. You take care of the rest. And that, sort of became our tagline too.
I love
Customers are also good copywriters.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Oh my gosh. I'm in the process of that right now, interviewing customers and hearing the exact words that they use to describe what's most valuable in the work we do together. And it can be a scary process. And I watch, other kind of customers shy away from this when I suggest doing the same thing for them, because you're like, it was a great experience, you had, but you're not really totally sure what they're going to say. So leaning into that, right? Like, it's kind of like how it's the right direction to go, because it's just a touch scary, but that information changes everything, or it has the opportunity to, at least. You follow it. Very cool. So one last big question. What would you say is your biggest weakness and how it holds you back? And I know we kind of touched on this a little bit, right? Like being your own, competitor, right? But what would you say, if, phrased a little differently, is a
Um,
weakness that holds you back?
Being my own worst critic.
Hmm.
And this is something I've just come to the realization probably in the last, I don't know, 3 to 4 months, right? I'm harder on myself than any boss has ever been,
Hmm.
or harder on myself than I am on any other employee. And it hurts the performance, right? Because I'm working from a place of regret or fear or anger or shame,
Hmm.
as opposed to the creative part of joy. And then the other thing too is that it steals my joy, or not steals it, but gives it away. Right. So
Yeah.
I'm trying to be more self-love, if you will.
Yeah.
And how would I manage myself? And I'm the owner and the CEO, right? So sometimes I would have to put, my owner hat talking on to the CEO, or the CEO hat talking to the owner. And because one of the things I've realized is that in life, I've always looked ahead, in 3 years, Brittany, when I'm exactly like I said I'll be there, I won't have a care in the world. But the
Hmm.
truth is I'll always have the care in the world there. And if I'm not happy where I am today, I won't be happy 3 years ago from now. I would say that's my weakness, has been being too hard and too critical on myself.
Thanks for being willing to share that, because that is something that I think so many of us can relate to. I will speak personally. I totally relate to that. I have, these impossible standards for myself, right? But yet I spend a ton of time supporting other high achieving people and being like, it's okay, you're doing awesome, which is why you should get a coach. So you have somebody who reminds you that you're doing awesome, and you're doing amazing things. Um, but it's such a hard line, because sometimes that high standard is what creates that achievement, but it's tricky, right? It's like the other side of that can be really damaging, and it can pull your brain into the wrong part of itself, that kills the creativity, that kills the inspiration, that kills the joy. And so it's really important to keep that in check. Get a support system that can help, mirror back to you how you're doing, be honest with you about where you're at, but really finding that time to reflect and check in, like, what's this all for? Like, at the end of the day, am I really getting what I need to out of this life? Is this business supporting, the life I'm trying to create for myself? Great question. Okay. How can people find you when they realize I need to be a guest on some podcasts because that just amplifies my business and visibility. You guys, obviously, I can attest to this. I, make a big effort to be on podcasts and host my own. So tell us, how do we get in touch with you?
Yes, you can just go back to interview valet with a V .com. And, there's a free assessment there that says, will podcast interview marketing work for you? 10 questions. There's a free copy of my book there, Podcast Guest Profits. I sell a lot of those, but I give more of them away. And then, if you want to jump on a call, right? If you're wondering, how would this work? Because it's not about the podcast interview. That's just the means to the goal. And, we'd love to talk with you. Our mission is to personally introduce inspiring thought leaders to millions of people they could serve for the betterment of all. So if that resonates with you, just go back to interviewvalet.com and you can connect with me there.
Sure. And if you guys are seeing this live right now, LinkedIn, you'll be Tom's profile is on there. We're going to get it on the show notes. So if you're seeing a post-production version, it's going to be right there. And you can also reach out to me via my website and I'll get you in touch with Tom. Thank you so much. You've been such an incredible guest. I really appreciate having you on. I know you've shared lots of little, wisdom nuggets with us, and I'm grateful for that and the opportunity to chat with you. Thank you to the audience for taking your time to sit with us and hopefully gain lots of insights about how to change the way you show up and lead and drive in your business. Until next time, guys, have a great day.